show. Well, I'm Jeff Johnson, Ben Gretch there. He is the editor-in-chief of the Fantasy Insiders, and Josh ADHD. Of course, you know Ben and Josh because these guys are goats in the industry. I can't officially start the show yet because I don't have my backwards hat on yet.
Oh.
There we go. Ready to break down week
ready to roll.
We're now like the Matt Patricia triumvirate.
I know. You got to turn that hat around backwards, and then we're ready to host this show.
That's when the monster comes out.
You're dang right. All right, guys.
We'll just
First off, there are a bunch of statistical surprises I want to talk about this week. Obviously, number one on the list is Pat Mahomes. Like, from a fantasy perspective, Ben, how do you break down what he did today?
I have no idea. I mean, he did everything right. He was insanely efficient. I don't know how many attempts he finished up with, but early on in the game, I think he had his first 4 touchdowns on his first 13 attempts or so. Threw a little bit more when they fell behind, but his passer rating was through the roof. Everything he did was perfect. I mean, he didn't throw interception. He threw 6 touchdowns. His yards per attempt was extremely high because he pushes the ball down the field, and he threw for over 300 yards on 28 attempts it was. So, I mean, 23 of 28, 326 yards on 28 attempts, 6 touchdowns on 28 attempts. That's insane. He's now thrown 10 touchdowns through 2 games. We should probably say something about like regression and how that's going to impact the whole offense and all of that. But like at this point, I'm just pretty confident he's going to maintain his 80 touchdown pace and just throw 80 touchdowns. All
right, that's a good prediction. That's what we call snap judgment. Josh, do you think he's going to stay on that 80 touchdown pace, or can we expect some regression? Okay, I know there's regression expected, but let's be real. Like, what can we expect from Patrick Mahomes as far as where he stands in the quarterback rankings rest of season?
Well, I think everybody's probably going to overreact a little bit and chase this insane efficiency. We just talked about it. It's not going to hold up. He's not going to throw 6 touchdowns a game. He's not going to be able to push 300 plus yards on, 25 to 28 attempts. At some point, this is going to come back to earth a little bit. And it's probably going to depend on defenses getting a little film on this guy and figuring out how to defend this offense a little bit. But I don't know. I think Ben summed it up. It's insane. Like, I couldn't believe what I watched today. They just went out and smoked Pittsburgh at Heinz Field.
Right. And one of the things he did so well was he spread the ball around. I mean, it seemed like every player on their team scored a touchdown today. I mean, Chris Conley scored. Demarcus Robinson scored. Kelsey got in twice. Kareem Hunt caught a touchdown. Tyreek Hill caught a touchdown. And Sammy Watkins had a 100-yard day. He didn't get in. He's about the only one who didn't score. That's like Aaron Rodgers stuff, like being that efficient on that few attempts and getting everyone involved and knowing who to hit and where to go with the ball and not just really keying in on someone. To your question about where to rank him, I am going to overreact. I'll probably have him in like QB5 range for rest of season, and my rest of season update at Fantasy Insiders for our rest of season ranks later this week. Just because, like, what he's done through 2 games, I think he definitely can't maintain, but there's just so many positive signs.
Well, that's the reason why I asked, is because let's say you valued him as just a merely top 10 quarterback, but somebody in your league is probably going to overreact. Maybe they're the owner that just decided to go 0 quarterback and ended up with Eli Manning as their starting quarterback. What sort of trade value would get for him? But it sounds like to me, Ben, you want to hold on to him. You're not even going to really entertain a trade offer.
No, I wouldn't say I wouldn't entertain it. I mean, I think the quarterback position in general is replaceable, and I think if somebody is going to make you, a really, that Godfather offer, that really good offer because of how good he's been, they think he's going to be, what Deshaun Watson was last year, but going to maintain that for a 16-game pace and be this new superstar. You got to entertain it for sure, because like keeping it up is extremely difficult, and it's not likely that he does anything like this over 16 games. But I just think like where you slot him in and where you rank him, it's really hard to justify ranking like a Kirk Cousins or something over him right now, when what we're seeing is it just seems so repeatable. He's not just locking it on any given, person. It hasn't just been a couple splash plays. It's been a lot of plays. It's been a very vertical offense, which is what you want in fantasy. We know he has athleticism with his legs too, that he can fall back on at some point if he needs to. But he's just picking apart defenses down the field. Week 1, his ADOT was 13.9 or something like that. I didn't see what his ADOT was this week, but I'm sure it was extremely high again. He's pushing the ball.
His ADOT is 10.93 today.
For today. So both
that was today.
Yeah, which is extremely high for a quarterback when you include the any kind of running back targets and shorter targets. So both of those were 2 weeks in a row now. We've seen him play this more modern NFL game, and everyone says, "Oh, it's it's a college offense, or he's just a college quarterback." Well, that's what the good NFL offenses are going to. That's what the Eagles did last year. They had tons of air yards. They pushed the ball downfield and they worked it underneath. And the Chiefs' offense looks just so perfectly designed right now for his skills, and he's executing it so well. It's perfect for the modern NFL game where receivers can run a little more free down the field. His statistical upside is obviously there. We know that now. He's not going to hit it every week, but that's why I would say I'd put him over a guy I just threw out like Kirk Cousins or somebody who had a very good day today as well. I just think Mahomes is the guy that's going to have these peak games more frequently, probably, if you start to think about it and break it down and project it out for the rest of the year.
Josh, you threw out the ADOT stat, so I'm going to ask you. I'm sure a lot of people watching, they're familiar with ADOT, but maybe they might not know why ADOT is important for a quarterback. Why, to you, is ADOT so important at the quarterback position?
Well, I mean, it's ADOT. We talk about average depth of target. How far is the quarterback pushing the ball downfield on an average pass? It's important because it shows the amount of risk an offense is willing to take down the field when they try to air the ball out. And when the game script is not in a team's favor, they will tend to push the ball further downfield because they're taking more risk. When we see an offense that is ahead significantly in a game and still throwing the ball well downfield, that's a sign that that's an offense. It's highly tuned, and the efficiency at which they are producing at this ADOT, for the season, Kansas City's Patrick Mahomes' ADOT is 12.05. That in and of itself is very significant because most quarterbacks are probably right in the 9 to 9.5 range. The fact that he has a 0.88 pacer, and when we talk about pacer, that is air yards converted into receiving yards. So the simple fraction, receiving yards over air yards. So what's the efficiency on the number of air yards downfield? It's 0.88 on a 12.05 ADOT is insane. This is way outlier territory. So when we talk about regression, that's going to come back in a little bit. The fact that they've achieved this in 2 games, to me, it's incredible. And I don't know what to do with it right now other than write it, because a lot of the touchdowns they're scoring, they're shorter targets. Quite a few of them have been behind the line of scrimmage. And
sure.
I think that in and of itself is showing the diversity in the offense right now and the flexibility. And I think Ben hit all those topics. It's he's got all these weapons around him, and he's got a coach that knows how to stretch the defense and utilize all those guys. So it's crazy, man.
Yeah, maybe it'll come back. Maybe it won't, because Tyreek Hill is one of the best deep ball players in the NFL. And Travis Kelce at tight end, certainly one of the tight ends that can stretch the field better than any in the NFL. So maybe it'll come back, maybe it won't. It's interesting to watch, that's for sure. So for me, ADOT means the higher the ADOT, the better the chance at success. That's a general way to put it. It's the complete opposite from high school and college, where you're looking at pimple to score ratio. The more dots you had, the less successful you were.
Gosh, no.
Once I got down to ADOT, it's I feel like I could get to second base with pretty much anybody I want. Isn't that right, sir? All right, statistical anomalies. We also
nailed it.
I know, right? I just came up with that. I don't know if you could tell, but I just came up with that.
Yeah,
John Brown. It was good to see Smoke back. 221 air yards on 10 targets. Ben, I know we are high on him as a company at Fantasy Insiders, but were you expecting this early for John Brown? Only a second game with the Ravens and Joe Flacco.
No, I mean, he had an awesome preseason, and I think there was, a belief that he could be, or that he was very, very clearly the second receiver over Willie Snead. There was a little bit of a debate who would kind of emerge there coming in, for most of the offseason for best ball drafters and those types of people that were already drafting and doing a lot of ranks. and what we saw in preseason made it pretty clear that it was probably going to be Brown behind Crabtree. But what we've now seen through 2 games is all 3 of them are being targeted a fair amount. Willie Snead's still getting used a lot, and Crabtree's played all right as well. But Brown is the guy getting all the air yards. He has a 33% share of the air yards through 2 games on 14 targets. Snead has 14. Crabtree has 16 targets. So they're all right in that same range. But those 2 guys have 14 and 20% shares of air yards. So Brown is getting all this vertical pass opportunity and has turned it into a lot of yards. He only caught 4 or 10 passes last week, but he was able to go over 100 yards and score a touchdown, a really impressive touchdown. Actually, he finished with 92 yards, but had a good game on Thursday night. And when we see those 221 air yards, I mean, it's just an indication that they're willing to push the ball down the field, and he's going to be able to put up 40 yards on a given play at various points when they do hit on those things. So the air yards are just that's what those are indicating for a receiver. We're looking for the potential for chunk plays down the road, and he's definitely getting that volume. Second most air yards this week, that 221 number of any receiver. So definitely a notable stat for week 2.
He looked good. Josh, do you think that Michael Crabtree is still the number 1 receiver there in Baltimore?
I think ultimately he probably will be from a target standpoint, but just looking at the sheer usage between the receivers in Baltimore, they're like 1A and 1B right now. They're just deployed a little bit differently. So I think it may vary by week. So far, the game scripts have set up so that John Brown's been the guy. And we might see at some point if they get in a competitive game where they have a slight lead, maybe not squatting on somebody like they did Buffalo, that maybe Crabtree's the guy as a possession receiver.
What's your general thought on the Baltimore passing attack? Coming into the season, I feel like we were sleeping on Baltimore just a little bit. Through the first 2 weeks, it's looked pretty good. So what do you think about their offense in general?
I think it looks exactly like what I thought it would look like. It's not efficient. I think it will succeed when they can be relatively efficient and get the lead and their defense doesn't give it up. Joe Flacco's still a sloppy passer. A lot of the throws that he's making, especially ones that John Brown is coming down with, are not good throws, throwing into a lot of traffic, and John Brown's either fighting off traffic or it's just happening to get there. So I think there's going to be some ups and downs here, but I think the volume is going to be there where it may not matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Flacco's 300-yard game, it was his first one since the 2016 season. I made a note in Stealing Signals last week that he extended his streak of games without throwing for 300 yards to 20 last week, and then he broke it this week. But it took 55 pass attempts. And so the question is, whether they'll throw that much when they get into heavy positive game script, whether they'll do more to try to get Alex Collins going, who really hasn't gotten going yet this year. But I agree with Josh. Yeah, I think it's going to be a little up and down, and it's going to depend on volume. And right now, Flacco is throwing a lot, and that's probably going to come down.
Well, there are 2 negative game scripts in a row here for Baltimore with Alex Collins. Is he somebody you view as a trade target, though? Because, I mean, it's not like every game is either going to be such a blowout that they don't even need Alex Collins, or they're so far behind that they can't use Alex Collins.
Potentially a trade target, depending on price. I think you need to get him cheaper than a lot cheaper than where he was valued in drafts. I mean, I don't think you pay full price, because one of the things we have seen is they've been quick to use the other backs in the red zone. Obviously, Ken Dixon's injured now, but they used him a little bit in the red zone in week 1, and then they used Javorius Allen for a short rushing touchdown in week 2. Collins also got a rushing touchdown in week 1. But just the fact that he doesn't have a dominant red zone share is not helpful, and hasn't really had a dominant receiving role yet, although he had a decent week 2 receiving. So I would be concerned about the red zone touches in particular. It seems like they're willing to kind of rotate the backs in there, and they did that last year as well. And I think a lot of people were projecting that Collins would get quite a bit of red zone work this year, but we haven't really seen that yet. So he's a guy who, yes, I think has some bounce back potential, but I can't imagine somebody who drafted him being willing to sell him low enough to where I would really like him, because I think he might end up just being a between the 20, just too high of his percentage of touches will be between the 20s rush attempts. And if you look at like targets and red zone touches and between the 20s carries, targets and red zone touches are the very valuable ones. And so kind of by default, the between the 20s catches, they're overvalued a little bit when we look at touches and things like that. those are the things to kind of fade. Guys who have 15 carry games but don't catch any passes and don't get any red zone touches. That people think that guy has a good workload. He really doesn't for fantasy purposes. And I think Alex Collins might be like Amir Abdullah was that guy last year. I think Alex Collins might be kind of like that this year, which is a little bit scary to me.
It's weird, too, since Buck Allen is the one that's getting all the goal line work. I'm glad you brought that point up because the next guy I want to talk about is Matt Breida. 11 carries for 138 yards today. Seems like he would be the guy in between the 20s that's getting most of the work, and then Alfred Morris might get the goal line work. And also Philip Lindsay. Josh, just talk about those two guys this week, and if you're buying into them. Certainly Matt Breida, is he the number one running back in San Francisco now?
Yeah, so we just talked about red zone touches, and Matt Breida got 4 red zone touches today. So compared to the 0 he had last week, and he doubled what Alfred Morris had today. So I think that's a good thing. I guess you have to look at Breida going forward. I mean, he broke a long touchdown run today, and he looked damn good doing it.
Yeah, those 4 red zone touches, that's a great note because his TD was a 66-yard touchdown run.
That's right. So
Philip Lindsay had a big run too, though. I mean, Philip Lindsay looks like he's shot out of the cannon every time he touches the ball.
Right.
Yeah, he does, and it looks like he's taking that job over by force. And that's very concerning for anybody that drafted Royce Freeman highly like me, thinking that Royce Freeman was going to be the cat to run that offense. And, maybe Philip Lindsay just totally regresses to hell next week, and we see this guy that doesn't do anything. But it's not looking like that so far. He's looked good 2 weeks in a row, and this is it follows up all the stuff that was coming out of camp. That they got this guy, he looks good, and look out for him. He may take the job over, and it looks like that's happening right now.
Okay, so that's 2 of us, Ben. Do you think Philip Lindsay is legit? Because I can't see anything in his game that I don't like.
Yeah, no, I think he is, and it's a huge problem for Royce Freeman. The other issue is that Devontae Booker still playing plenty. I mean, he was in a fair amount today. If Freeman and Lindsay were just like this thunder and lightning duo, Freeman would still have some value. But what's happening in the first 2 games is Lindsay's kind of taking over the backfield, and Booker is still playing enough that Freeman's touches just aren't there. In week 1, he managed to add a few rush attempts late because they were running out the clock, and he added like 34 rushing yards in their final drive as they were milking clock, and he ended up with 71 rushing yards, which matched Lindsay's 71 rushing yards. This week, they were behind a little bit. Freeman got 8 touches, 8 carries, 1 target, which he didn't catch. Meanwhile, Lindsay got 14 carries, was the clear lead back. I'll be really interested to see the snap rates, but I'm almost positive he played significantly more snaps than Freeman, and that Booker played more snaps than it looks like on the stat line. And so it's really looking like Lindsay is the lead guy, and Freeman and Booker are kind of the other 2. The one positive note for Freeman, he got the carry at the 1 in a jumbo package. The next time they got down there to the 1, they put him in and gave him the carry at the 1 on 3rd down. Then they went for it on 4th down. They subbed him back out for 4th down, but they did a QB draw. But they did bring Freeman in for these close goal line carries on multiple drives, and I do think they still like him. But he's going to be somebody who's probably going to be mostly rush attempt, not a lot of passing work, because it looks like they really like Lindsay in the passing game, and then Booker's still playing, and he's a pass catcher. So not a great start for Royce Freeman, and it's not really necessarily his fault as much as Philip Lindsay is just taking over the backfield by force, like Josh said.
That's what frustrates me the most. I don't have a lot of shares of Royce Freeman because the time draft season came along, he was almost overpriced for me,
right.
But he hasn't done anything to necessarily lose touches. Philip Lindsay has just looked so good when he gets the ball. It's like they can't help but continue giving him the ball. So that's something to watch going forward for sure. Juju Smith-Schuster, by the way, guys, does anybody know how many targets he had in week 2?
I do, because I touted him in DFS and played him in like 45% of my GPPs. So I was counting all of those targets.
18 targets for Juju Smith-Schuster today. What's interesting is, we were all talking about Patrick Mahomes and this Chiefs offense, but the top 2 receivers in targets in week 2 were Juju Smith-Schuster and Antonio Brown. So this Pittsburgh Steelers passing offense is going to continue to be prolific. As far as Juju Smith-Schuster goes, Josh, let's throw it to you. What can we expect from him? I'm certainly not 18 targets every week going forward.
I guess it depends on how bad that defense looks going forward. I mean, they've struggled 2 weeks in a row. And now, granted, Cleveland didn't put a lot of points on them, but Cleveland moved the ball pretty decently against them. So I think Juju's going to be heavily utilized. He has to be. I mean, he's the second option in that passing attack, and he's a damn good player. And we put those things together with an offense that tends to throw the ball, 40 to 45 times a game. The volume's there. He's going to be able to smash every single week, especially if teams do like they did today with Kansas City, and they dedicate so much force to stopping Antonio Brown that Juju's just going to kill it, man. I'd go trade for him if I could right now.
Yeah.
I think he's worth going.
Well, that's the question. I mean, as far as where he ranks among other wide receivers, if he's going to be getting this many targets every week, it's hard for me to think he's anything less than a top 15 wide receiver. Am I right, Ben?
Yeah. No, I think you are. So the thing that I've been kind of saying actually since the preseason pretty heavily is that Juju smashed last year when there was opportunity for him to smash. But the stat that I've been referencing since the preseason is like kind of a made up stat, but trying to evaluate how concentrated offenses are, what percentage of the total skill position PPR points the top scorers, regardless of position, scored, right? So for the Steelers, their top two scorers were Bell and Brown. They scored 53% of the Steelers' skill position PPR points last year. That's something they've done for years. They've just dominated opportunity and dominated production because of that. Last year, they accounted for 53% of the team's total points. No other team was above 50%, so they were way above that, and that's despite Antonio Brown missing the final 2.5 games and Le'Veon Bell sitting week 17. So those guys missed a combined 3.5 games, and they were still that much more concentrated than any other team. Point being, it is difficult for ancillary pieces to produce in this offense unless they're highly efficient. The 1 year Martavis Bryant was really good in this offense, really high touchdown rate, didn't have a ton of targets. Juju did that last year, but the big thing he did last year, he always produced when there was opportunity. Martavis Bryant missed one game to a suspension. That was that Sunday night game in Detroit. Juju went off. Then the last 3 games of the year when Antonio Brown had that calf injury, he left in the first half in week 15. He missed 16 and 17. He hit at least 19 DraftKings points in every game. And then he came back and did that in weeks 1 and 2 this year with Le'Veon Bell shelved. So that's now in his career 6 games where he's hit at least 19 points if you count the 100-yard bonus in all 6 when there's been available opportunity in this offense. He's a legit player. He struggled to get targets when both Bell and Brown were in the offense. Bell averaged a 19% target share last year. And the point I made coming into this week with Juju, James Conner had a decent receiving role last week, but he only had a 14% target share. That's still very good for a running back. It's a significant difference from Le'Veon Bell's 19%. That's just a monster number for Le'Veon Bell. And that was in a game where James Conner touched the ball 36 times. They were giving him more carries than targets. This week, they were in a way more pass-heavy script. They threw the ball 60 times. James Conner only got 5 targets. Again, that's good for a running back, but that's not the kind of volume that prevents a second receiver from emerging. So Juju, when Le'Veon, in this game, a 60-attempt game, if Le'Veon Bell played in this game, there's no way he would have got 5 targets. He would have had 15 targets in this game. So there is more available opportunity here. Juju Smith-Schuster capitalized on that. He's done it every single time. And I think going forward, at least until Le'Veon Bell's back, and maybe after, depending on when he comes back and how the team operates, I just think everything is setting up so perfect for Juju. That's why those targets were there. The big thing, his ADOT was 5.2. That's like tight end numbers. I mean, that's like almost running back numbers. It's low underneath passes. He's taking over that part of the field, running drags, little quick outs, quick bubble screens. They're getting the ball to him, getting the ball in his hands because he's a playmaker. He's amazing after the catch. He's basically like Golden Tate, but kind of on steroids. Like, he's extremely good. I love Juju. Sorry.
Josh, before I ask the next question to you, I want to know, were you high on Amari Cooper before the season, or were you low on Amari Cooper before the season?
I was very high on Amari Cooper.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about Amari Cooper then.
Perfect. Let's go,
10 receptions today, 116 yards, had an 8.1 ADOT. Is this for real, or is he somewhere between week 1 and week 2?
I think it seems like it's for real. I mean, they talked very much this week in Oakland about getting him the ball. And that he was open and they didn't get him the ball, and they had to make this concerted effort to get him the ball, and they damn sure did it today. I mean, they forced it his way, and it looks like it paid off. They probably should have won that game today. And
they definitely should have won that game today. There's no doubt about that.
So, I mean, it's I think it's probably going to be the real deal going forward. And the fact that he did it against Denver, who knows that, I think they know him well. And granted, Oakland is moving him around a little bit more than they did prior. But I think that he did it against Denver. I think that speaks some volume. Now, the one thing I'm curious about going forward is maybe this once, ironclad Denver pass defense isn't what it used to be. Because this is 2 weeks in a row now that offenses have come into Denver and moved the ball on them at will through the air. I mean, even Seattle, they moved the ball at will through the air on Denver, and they did it with the tight ends primarily, but they still did it. So we might look at Denver as a bit of a target for passing games, especially when they get outside of Denver. And I think that may be a takeaway here. But I think Cooper is probably going to be kind of what we saw today going forward.
Yeah, one interesting note about Denver's D there was that Carr was throwing a lot of underneath passes. So that you noted Amari's average depth of target was only 8.1. He caught all 10 of his passes, and that's great. He's more of a downfield guy. And the comments last week were like he was open downfield. They missed some shots down the field. But today, all these catches were underneath. I think that's an awesome note for Amari's production going forward, that he was catching these mid-range and shorter targets and racking up yards after the catch, because he is a very good after-the-catch player as well.
Just because that shows he has another dimension to his game?
Yeah, because when he was really good in his first 2 years, he was really good down the field. If you look at depth of target, where he was productive, he was very productive down the field. That cratered last year, and it almost had to regress, and we should see some improvement on downfield targets this season from him. That's a part of his game that was very good going back to college. So, yes, I mean, if he's racking up additional catches, additional targets, additional catches on underneath passes, it's a more multifaceted player, right? But, yeah, Derek Carr's the team high ADOT this week was Jordy Nelson at 10.5. No one else was in double digits. Threw a lot of underneath passes. So that's kind of – I thought that was notable at least, kind of interesting.
Will Fuller looked great today. Moving on to this Texans offense, 8 for 113 and a touchdown. Beautiful touchdown catch, by the way. 9 targets for him, which we weren't seeing that at all last year. It seems like he was just a hyper-efficient wide receiver. Is he rounding into a complete wide receiver right before our eyes? Ben, I'll go with you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he had a really good college production profile. Last year was very efficient, couldn't obviously maintain that efficiency. This year we couldn't expect him to. Particularly efficient with Deshaun Watson. He was very inefficient after Watson was out of the lineup, while Hopkins still continued to produce, which was kind of interesting. But he is a guy who has done enough thus far in his career, coming into the league at a young age and having a really strong production profile in college, that we should expect him to be a success, frankly. He's probably not going to have huge target numbers every week playing opposite DeAndre Hopkins, who we know at some point is going to have one of these 15 target weeks, which he does. But Fuller's a splash play guy that can rack up some targets and rack up some production, and definitely he's like a really good best ball player. But obviously we're in seasonal now. Definitely a good guy to have on your roster, and a good guy to. I mean, if he's like a free agent to target, I don't know if I would be trying to buy him off a high game, but yeah, I mean he's a good, more well-rounded receiver than he probably gets credit for. Yes,
free agent, that's got to be an 8-team league, right? If he's a free agent.
Yeah, that's probably not it. He's probably not on any waiver wires.
Yeah, one thing I want to hop in.
14-teamer. Nope, not available.
Yeah.
Josh, what was that?
Yeah, I want to hop in real quick because we talked about volume concentration in offenses a bit earlier, and this situation appears to be brewing up much the same way, with Hopkins and Fuller dominating the targets in this offense, and some scraps being stretched out among the tight ends, and then Bruce Ellington. And I think this is probably worth monitoring going forward if they're going to be so heavily concentrated with Hopkins and Fuller on the targets, that it's significant and maybe worth chasing Fuller right now, because this may be the cheapest you can get him going forward.
Wow. Okay. So this is the cheapest you're going to find him going forward. You brought up a really good point, though, because it seems like, and maybe this is just the nature of the high scoring first 2 weeks, but it seems like more than years past, we have a ton of first and second passing options on teams hogging all of the targets.
Don't you love that?
I absolutely love it. But I was looking at the leaders in targets in week 2, and it was Juju and Antonio Brown, which fine. I mean, that could be an anomaly just because it's such a high scoring game against the Chiefs this week. But Adam Thielen and Steph Diggs, they were number 5 and 6 on this list. Mm-hmm. So and I shouldn't be surprised because we were drafting Adam Thielen and Steph Diggs so highly. But each of them had 13 targets. It's like you mentioned Patrick Mahomes spreading the ball around. As far as these two teams are concerned, I love the fact that they're just pumping all these targets to their top 2 pass catching options, and just watching their fantasy stats, obviously follow along. So it's pretty interesting to note.
It's a great point because the last couple of years, the big trend we've seen is more 3-wide sets and more spreading around to ancillary pieces than wide receiver 1s and wide receiver 2s. We've seen elite target, like the top level target shares, come down in 2017 and 2016 from where they were in 2015, 2014, and before. Teams, wide receiver 1s weren't dominating offenses the way they had been in the past. And it does seem like to start 2018, that's bouncing back after a 2-year lull. And we're seeing more of that. And I mean, it's great for fantasy. It's fun. It's also interesting. I kind of wonder what the reasoning is, because teams are still running out 3 receiver sets a ton, but they're finding more, maybe they're just being more creative, but they're finding ways to get the ball into their top options' hands more. And Josh made a great point off the air as well, or before we started, about how running back targets are through the roof as well. Josh, why don't you chat about that for a minute?
Yeah, the one thing interesting I've noticed, just looking at the quick targets over the first 2 weeks, especially the target market share, is the number of running backs that are commanding insane workloads through the air. So we're talking about Saquon Barkley tonight alone had 48% target share of his offense. With Christian McCaffrey, this is the second week in a row that he's over 32%. So he's just swallowing up so much of the passing offense there that you can't ignore it. And, other running backs we're looking at. So Zeke
Chris
Elliott
Thompson had 14 targets today.
Yeah, and they weren't behind that much. Like, they were behind by a score most of the game. And then we look at Thompson had huge numbers. Zeke Elliott had over 30% today. So, we're starting to see running backs creeping into this technically like wide receiver 2 role, in their offense, in some cases wide receiver 1, that type of volume. And it's going to be hard to ignore going forward. And we may see a few more running backs kind of creep into this going forward.
Theo Riddick, 12 targets today. We talked about that too. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yep.
As a Kerryon Johnson fan, I'm not too I'm not too keen on Theo Riddick getting all those targets. I did when I saw Saquon Barkley's stats, though. I was like, all right, 8 receptions, and then it was like 32 yards. Come on, bro. I guess that's just a function of being in an Eli Manning offense. Well, just really quickly, I want to follow up on the point that we made, because sure, we notice that the first and second passing options or receiving options are getting more of a target share. But what does that mean in general for wide receivers? Because I'm trying to think about, the end result here. Is it going to be that maybe the wide receiver position in general, in whole, isn't quite as deep as it used to be because all of those targets are now going to 2 receivers instead of 3 and 4?
Yeah, that would be the impact in like bigger picture. I know that the 0 running back debate is always a really, contentious one, but bigger picture, it would mean that we're trending toward 2018 being a 0 running back year, because we have seen a lot of top end running backs not really smash. We've seen some smash, obviously. Kamara in week 1, Todd Gurley had 3 touchdowns in week 2, Melvin Gordon is smashing. But we've seen, especially that second tier, Devonta Freeman's injury, Joe Mixon's injury. We're going to get into those in a little bit. Guys like Royce Freeman not really doing it, kind of those upside plays. Not a lot of high running back picks, or not first rounders necessarily, but David Johnson is one first rounder who hasn't been. But not a lot of high running back picks are really, really smashing. There are a few. But all the top receivers seem to be really hitting right now. And it probably is the case that the market's not going to correct enough. And if that's a trend that you kind of think is going to stick around, and I don't know really where I fall in that, whether this is a 2-week outlier and we're going to see, kind of move back towards 2017, 2016 trends, or if we're going to see this throughout the year. I don't really know where I fall in that yet. But if you do think that that's the case, I mean, it might be worth considering trading a high value running back to get a high value receiver, because right now it looks like teams who went really high end receiver, especially in PPR leagues, who stocked up on a lot of these receivers, they're probably smashing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned David Johnson, kind of a missing persons report on him. There's plenty of those guys out there that just haven't produced. So let's talk about David Johnson. Josh, not looking good for David Johnson and the Arizona Cardinals offense in total for the first 2 weeks. How scared are you as a David Johnson owner?
I'm petrified at the moment, and I need to see that organization willing to make some change pretty quick that says that they give a damn about this season. And the first move they can make, obviously, is getting Sam Bradford out of there and putting Josh Rosen in the game and get somebody in there that's willing to take a risk with the ball. It's clearly not Bradford. The other concern I have, and we've seen this a bit on Twitter, is Mike McCoy. He's just outright refusing to use David Johnson in the passing game. And David Johnson today had 2 targets. Last week, I think he had 3 or 4 targets. And they're not using him in any diverse way whatsoever. That's what's the most concerning to me.
Yeah, and Graham Barfield made a great point about that, where his ADOT and his air yards per target are way down. His routes run per game are way down. Like to your point about not using him in any kind of diverse way. They're not throwing to him out in the field of play. The only couple times that he has gotten the ball have been, around the line of scrimmage, and then he's not out in routes. That was a big thing about David Johnson. He would actually get out in routes like a receiver. But the one thing I would caution about freaking out on him, I did a quick little screener because the Cardinals ran 43 plays this week. And if you listen to any of the stuff we talked about last week, I harped on how they only ran 51 plays last week. And the bulk of those were in the fourth quarter. Again, this week they only ran 30 plays through 3 quarters. They ran 13 in the fourth, and they finished at 43 plays. So they've ran 94 plays total through 2 games, which is that's incredibly low. So I ran a quick screener, and since the merger, as far as what I could tell on my quick screener, there's only been 2 teams that have run fewer plays through the first 2 games of a season since 1970. The 1999 expansion Cleveland Browns and Alex Smith's rookie year, the 2005 49ers. So that's where Arizona is. That's their company right now.
Congrats, you're an expansion team.
Yeah. So they need to get Sam Bradford out of I totally agree with Josh. They need to play Josh Rosen. They probably need to fire their offensive coordinator. That is terrible. They're not sustaining drives, and they're not running enough plays. Now, Chase Edmonds caught 5 passes this week. He caught a decent amount last week. All 5 of those passes this week were in the fourth quarter. 4 of the 5 were on the final 5 plays of the game. The Cardinals had the ball as the game ended. After the 2-minute warning, they ran 5 plays, and the game ended. And Chase Edmonds caught a pass on 4 of those. So don't get that twisted. Don't be like, oh, Chase Edmonds actually has a role. He's cutting into David Johnson's role. That's not really the case. He caught a bunch of passes when the game was like Bradford was just giving up. They checked down to run the clock out, basically.
At least they got David Johnson out of the game to do that.
Yeah,
right.
At least they took him out and let somebody else mop that up.
I wish they would have let him mop it up for my fantasy teams.
Oh, yeah, that's true. 2 things I take from that. Number one is when you're in the company of the expansion Browns and then Alex Smith's rookie season, it's like things have to get better from here. And then number 2 is it's the Rams. I mean, the Rams defense is going to be very, very good. They're going to be doing something similar to this more than once this season. As far as what the atmosphere is like inside that locker room, Steve Wilks, head coach for the Cardinals after the game, said, I'm not going to sit here and say right after the game what we're going to do from a personnel standpoint. But I will say this, everybody will be evaluated. So
Nice.
He's already obviously thinking about something changing in that offense, and I would say it's probably Sam Bradford.
It's got to be the quarterback position.
So hang tight with David Johnson. We kind of have to do that anyway, right?
Yeah, and just another quick note on Arizona. So we talked about it, and Ben just mentioned they've run 94 plays this season. So it's just this incredibly crappy play volume. 64 of those have been dropbacks. So they've only run the ball 30 times across 2 games. So we would tend to think that will regress to the mean at some point. David Johnson will see volume improve.
Yeah.
It can only go up from here. So
Right.
panic can sell him right now, I think, is a bad move. You're just going to get pennies on the dollar anyway. So stick to your guns.
94 plays through 2 weeks. That's like Chip Kelly in one game in his first year in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Extremely.
Two other guys disappeared this week, Dante Pettis and George Kittle. You know, Dante Pettis had that first reception, a 30-yarder in the first quarter, and you thought all is good. Let's go to you, Ben. I mean, somebody who liked Dante Pettis and George Kittle preseason, this is a game that the 49ers won, and they scored some points. Should we be concerned about those two?
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about them. So they were in very plus game script. They only threw 26 passes, and running backs, including Kyle Juszczyk, who's Juice Box, whatever you call him, who's like a hybrid tight end. I don't know. I include him in the running backs. They got 10 of those 26 pass attempts. It's a little concerning for Kittle that Garrett Selleck got that target in the red zone and caught the touchdown. We wanted to see Kittle have a really dominant target share. I'm going to be looking at those snaps and those routes run and stealing signals and trying to see what kind of went on there. I do think Kittle got another target in the red zone earlier in the game that didn't hit, and then it hit for Selleck. So it might have just been bad variance there. And then as far as Pettis is concerned, they just weren't really throwing to the receivers in this game because they were ahead. They were playing very conservatively. But that, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to read too much into it. When a team throws 26 pass attempts, that's just kind of one of those weird outcomes.
Josh, who would you rather have rest of season, George Kittle, Mr. Spark Score, or O.J. Howard?
Man, the way things are going right now, it's kind of hard not to say O.J. Howard, I think. But I would prefer Kittle. I think Kittle's going to be in a more secure situation going forward in the offense. I think we could trust what Shanahan's going to do there. I don't think we're going to see the game script that we saw today frequently for San Francisco this year. I think they'll be in tighter games where they had to use Kittle a bit more. So I wouldn't fault anybody for going with O.J. Howard in that situation because O.J. Howard looked good today, and he
looked like a wide receiver on that 7-yarder.
Yeah, and the thing I noticed, and I think it was NFL Philosophy on Twitter, made a note that Todd Monken is calling the plays for Tampa Bay now. And you could see it in the offense the first 2 weeks. It is night and day different from what Dirk Cutter was doing the last couple seasons. And I think we have to take a serious note of that now that they've had these two effectively dominant offensive performances across 2 weeks against two excellent defenses, what we think are excellent defenses. And we got to carry that forward. And if that means you need to take O.J. Howard and ride that offense the way it's performing right now, man, go for it. I don't have any fault with that. But personally, I'm going to ride Kittle.
I have a hard time thinking that O.J. Howard is not in a more secure situation than George Kittle. Did you see what Ryan Fitzpatrick wore in the postgame? You don't dress that way if you're not super confident. I mean,
just
bravo.
So much
as much money as he's made, he has every right to wear all that swag.
But it was Deshaun Jackson's outfit, which I thought was
Is
hilarious.
that what it was?
Yeah.
The question is, did he take it with Deshaun Jackson knowing it or not? I really hope he just stole it out of the locker and wore it.
You didn't see?
Not knowing that.
So, like, midway through his interview, he said, okay, I can only take 2 more questions because Deshaun is waiting to get his stuff back. And then over in the corner, you see Deshaun Jackson just watching the interview with no shirt on. Which was impressive. I mean, it looked pretty good. I'm not going to lie. All right. Jack Doyle, Rex Burkhead, 2 other guys I thought disappeared today. Let's go ahead and talk about Rex Burkhead because I think he's the fantasy player that most people are more concerned about. Sony Michel played today. James White had a big game. Rex Burkhead was the one we were drafting in the 5th or 6th round, though. So, Ben, what should we think about Rex Burkhead going forward?
I was concerned. I don't know how healthy he was, but Sony Michel carried him 10-6, and then Burkhead didn't get any targets. James White played a lot. They were behind, and they do that, but Burkhead usually gets in there a little bit in the passing formations. Again, I'm going to have to look at the snaps and the routes run information and draw a better conclusion on that, but White had 8 targets, so I'm feeling like White probably played a lot more snaps, and he also had 4 carries of his own, and Michel had 2 targets. So for Burkhead to not have any targets today and only 6 carries, definitely a very disappointing performance in my opinion.
Yeah, Josh, this is somebody who we're talking about getting snaps possibly in the slot coming into the season. So for you, where do you put Rex Burkhead?
I think I'm right there with Ben. I'm concerned. Can we chalk this up to a game script anomaly? I think it's very possible. I mean, they kind of got smoked today, and maybe they felt like he was better suited on the bench, and they would try to ride maybe what they felt like were, I don't know, better passing game options. I don't know how you can get a better passing game option really than Rex Burkhead, other than James White. So I think we'll see more of him next week. I mean, we know this is kind of typical with New England running backs. They disappear for a couple weeks from time to time. And that's just their game plan.
Mm-hmm. I feel like people are saying it's injury related, right? Like maybe he wasn't fully healthy. But if that was the case, why even play Rex Burkhead in week 2 when you have James White and a supposedly healthy Sony Michel?
Yeah, I think if you have Burkhead at 70 or 80%, and you can get him on the field for a few snaps, I think he helps your offense, even if he's not touching the ball, because he confuses the defense, or at least that's kind of the intent, is to make the defense think that you have more weapons out there than you might actually have. So I think we'll see better from him going forward. It's probably going to be game script dependent. If he's 100% healthy, I think they're probably going to ride him like a bell cow.
Yeah, and we don't get a ton of information out of New England, but hopefully we'll get some quotes or something this week, or at least some practice reports, something from the beat reporters that shed some light on what the playtime split was, or why the playtime split was what it was last week, and whether we should expect that going forward. I mean, you just kind of wait and see at this point.
You want me to be perfectly honest with you guys?
Yes.
No.
Always.
Okay, I'm going to be honest, Josh. I think we could do a better job asking Bill Belichick questions than the New England beat reporters. Like after a loss, it's like they're intimidated to ask questions. Like you could tell. It's like they have a list of questions that's like 15 questions long, and they see what mood he's in, and then they like X out the first 10, and then they go to number 11. It's just a terrible canned question that doesn't actually get an answer.
Yeah, they've learned.
Yeah, they've learned. But, the thing with Belichick is if you ask him an insightful question, he will give you a very thoughtful and insightful response back, and typically with a lot of history embedded in it. So I don't know. Maybe the guys up there just don't know how to ask the right questions.
I would get on his nerves so bad. I mean, as soon as it started going south, I would just lean into that bad mood, Ask obviously terrible questions. At least then you're going to get a reaction from it. But maybe that's
then you'll become a meme. But that'll be fun.
I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly fine with that. So Rex may have been unhealthy. There are a few other names that I want to talk about as far as a health perspective goes. Devonta Freeman's obviously at the top of that list because Tevin Coleman looked great today. But Ito Smith got some carry as well. So Ben, as far as Tevin Coleman's game and what to expect for the next couple of weeks while Devonta Freeman is out, how should we expect that time share to go?
Yeah, no, it was interesting to see Ito Smith get 10 touches to Coleman's 20. Coleman got 16 carries, Ito got 9, and Tevin got 4 targets and caught them all, and Ito got 1 and caught his. So it was nice to see Tevin play in the passing game last year when he was in for Devonta Freeman. They kind of just limited him to the ground game for that 2-game sample. He only had like 3 targets over the 2 games. He caught 4 passes today. And I thought that was kind of a 2-game anomaly because the game that Freeman came back, he got like 6 targets back in his secondary role. He does get involved in the pass game, is my point. He is that two-way player, can be that two-way player. But what we know he is a splash player. I mean, I think he is the closest thing we have to Jamal Charles now. I used that term a little bit last year when I was writing Stealing Signals, and really wanted to see them use him more because I think he has that explosive ability in the open field that we haven't seen since Charles, and maybe he's not on that level, but his efficiency throughout his career suggests that he could be potentially, at least in that stratosphere, but it's hard to compare people to Jamal Charles, obviously. But we saw that today, 16 carries, 107 yards. He had a couple nice long runs. Little concerning that he got a ball poked out of bounds on a long run. He's done that before a couple of times with long runs where he kind of loses sight of defenders and has a tendency to fumble after a long run. So I don't know. I really like Tevin Coleman, though. I mean, long-term, as long as he's starting, I think he should be in your lineup. He should be essentially on like RB1, RB2 borderline.
Joe Mixon out for the next 2 weeks. Giovanni Bernard obviously going to be stepping in as that number 1 running back. Josh, if you're a Giovanni Bernard owner, and then maybe if we're not, we're just speculating on Gio over the next couple of weeks at the Panthers and at the Falcons, should we be expecting a top 15 running back?
If they pass him the ball the way they should, I believe he has that potential. Yeah, I think he's probably going to be a lock if we think he's going to get anywhere in the neighborhood of the target share that, let's say players even like Saquon Barkley got tonight. Like, he saw probably 14, 15 targets. If we think that Gio Bernard's going to get 10 targets, I think he's a lock to start every week until Mixon is back. I mean, they were already featuring Mixon as a pass catcher in the offense before he got hurt. I don't think the role changes. So
okay, so you think he's going to be getting 12 to 15 carries and those receptions? I
think so. Yeah, I mean, we saw that at the end of last season when he took over kind of the starter back role when Mixon was hurt. That was the volume he got. He was dominant when he played like full starter snaps and got the carries and the targets. He was dominant. He scored tons of points. So if he steps right back into that role, which there's no reason to think that he won't, I think he's a lock to start in your rosters this season.
Yeah, I totally agree with Josh. And before last season, he had never really been a feature back. He'd always played with another back, Jeremy Hill, and before him, Ben Jarvis Green Ellis in his rookie year. He averaged, going into last year, more than 10 carries per game. So they had always used him as a receiver, but also giving him 10 carries, double-digit carries. He can handle 12 to 15 carries, certainly, plus his receiving role. He's not just like, a Theo Riddick or something, some type of scat back that doesn't necessarily have the rushing upside. I totally agree with Josh. I mean, I think we'll see what his target share is. The tough thing is what Bengals are going to show up. Week 1, we saw 50 total plays. Week 2, we saw 70 total plays. I mean, if they only run 50 plays, you're not going to get 10 targets out of Gio because they're not going to have targets that go around. So it's a team level issue a little bit, but definitely a guy who has that multidimensional upside.
It'll be interesting to see against the Panthers what he does. And for that matter, it'll be interesting to see what he does at the Falcons because we saw what Christian McCaffrey just did to that Falcons defense with all those targets and receptions. So definitely somebody I like as well. Dalvin Cook, Larry Fitzgerald, they both look like they got dinged up a little bit. Ben, are they healthy?
Yeah, I mean, I think they seem fine. We're gonna have to wait for reports. If we kind of know who will be the beneficiaries. In Cook's case, it would be Latavius Murray, obviously, and then they have some interesting guys. I think Michael Boone is the other guy that is interesting, and I don't know if Rock Thomas?
Yeah, Rock Thomas.
Is he even still? He's probably still on the roster. So those would be
yeah, he was inactive today along with Mike Boone.
Okay, so those would be the kind of depth guys. They both looked pretty good in the preseason. And Boone, I think, is a really good athlete, like a really good spark guy, right?
He is.
David's not here, so I don't know. David has like the spark.
we gotta channel David. Davis. Call it David. Anyway.
No, I was talking about David. David mentions spark score on the show at least 3 times a night, and usually it's about George Kittle.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about Maddock because he's all about it too, but. Yeah, I mean that's who would obviously benefit from Cook being gone, and then as far as Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk got a little bit extra run late in the game after Fitzgerald. I think after Fitzgerald had left, he would be the Arizona receiver that I'd be interested in because I think he would move inside and play the slot if Fitzgerald were to miss time, and he's a really he's a rookie with a strong production profile that could probably be productive. It's hard to know with rookies like how he would show out, but I'm high on him, so I like it.
Let's say that Larry Fitzgerald is healthy, and let's also assume that they're serious about making some decisions to make changes on that offense. Josh, even if Fitzgerald is healthy, do you like Christian Kirk as somebody you should take a flyer on the waiver wires this week?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if we think their play volume is going to increase to something reasonable like 60, then I think it's certainly worth taking a shot on Christian Kirk.
Just give us 60.
Yeah, just get to 60. I mean, 64 is the average. Just get to 60. You know, throw us a bone. I think Kirk's worth a shot if you think they're going to be a mediocre NFL offense. I mean, if they're slightly below, I think he's going to be fine. So, I don't have any issue taking a shot on him.
Which quarterback is worse, Sam Bradford or Eli Manning? I don't know why that thought just came to my mind, but I don't know which
They're
one.
The same guy.
They are the same guy.
They're both terrible.
They're really bad. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know. They're like a perfect comp for one another, and there's a reason why both of their teams are 0-2.
And they just panic in the pocket, throw the ball at their receiver's feet, take the punt. They're very similar at this stage in their careers.
They look similar at this stage in their careers, too. All right, Leonard Fournette, last player I want to talk about, because on Friday night we thought Leonard Fournette would be playing, and then sometime late on Saturday night we found out he wouldn't be playing. He was inactive for week 2 against the Patriots. As far as what we can expect for him going forward, it didn't seem like a very serious injury, but it doesn't seem like the Jaguars are they're very keen on putting him into the game until he's 100%. So if you're a Leonard Fournette owner, are you wanting to make a deal for TJ Yeldon just so you could have the healthy Jags running back? Josh, you take that one.
No, I no interest in that. I'm not a handcuff guy. One thing that was interesting to note was Blake Bortles rushing today. He rushed 6 times, and last week he had 4. So he's still going to be a healthy part of the rushing attack here. Yeldon, while I like Yeldon as a player, if I have Fournette, I'm not going to go get Yeldon. I don't want to have a handcuff. I'd rather just go chase another situation like Philip Lindsay, to be honest.
Well, yeah, I mean, if Philip Lindsay is your other option, you're going to go Philip Lindsay. But not everybody's in the situation where they can have Philip Lindsay, right? He's a top 10 running back.
He's elite.
He's elite. Ben, do you want TJ Yeldon if you're a Leonard Fournette owner?
No, I mean, I agree with Josh in theory for sure. Hamstring injuries are a little concerning. They can linger, and I think it was smart for Jacksonville to hold him out. It was only week 2, and they obviously got the win without him. So, proved to be extremely smart in that sense. No sense risking him if you can take down the Patriots without him, I guess. But kind of shows you the value of running backs too.
I knew you were going to say that. Why even?
Sorry, I had to go there. But yeah, I mean, hamstring injuries can linger, so I could see an argument for it if you can get them cheaply. But yeah, I'm not too concerned. Like you said, it wasn't supposed to be a very serious injury. I think they just held him out as a precautionary measure because it's still September.
And we talked about Philip Lindsay. Obviously, he's number 1 on the pickup list if he's there. So let's get into some watch list guys that we might think are on the waiver wires. Who's at the top of your list going into week 3, Josh?
Gosh, I'm probably going to be looking at Tyler Boyd, number 1. It just the pass volume he's getting in that offense is really significant. And Ben, I hate to say this, man, you're the John Ross truther, and it just looks like Boyd is the number 2 there, and his volume has been very healthy the last 2 weeks, and I don't see that changing going forward. I think John Ross is probably going to still have a role, but he looks like he's strictly a deep shot guy right now. An occasional bubble screen, but they don't seem to be orchestrating.
They haven't done either of those things, though.
Yeah, I know, right? They're not orchestrating ways to get him the ball. Yeah. That's the concern with Ross. And Boyd, they're using him frequently. So Boyd's probably number 1 for me. You were nodding your head, Ben. Is Tyler Boyd the number 2 option in this passing game?
Yeah, he is. I mean, it pains me to say, but that's 100% the case. Tyler Boyd was a good prospect in his own right, and he ran in the slot with the first team all throughout the preseason. He caught a touchdown from Andy Dalton in week 1 of the preseason. Definitely somebody that I had on my watch list. I added him in a couple places in a couple late drafts. Just based on his preseason usage, it became clear that he was going to be running with the first team. And then through the first 2 games, what we've seen is he's playing that slot role, and he's getting plenty of volume there. And the team is, in my opinion, using John Ross absolutely horribly. I mean, there's been concerns about whether he knows the playbook or has the confidence or whatever it is. Those are not good things to hear about your receiver, and I'll admit that he hasn't looked good. It hasn't been good. He had a kind of a bad drop on Thursday night on a quick slant that they ran for him, but most good coaches will find ways to get touches to these types of players. To whatever they talk about all the time on broadcasts. I don't know if it really works, but build confidence, whatever you want to call it. In my opinion, they should be throwing bubble screens to Ross, really quick hitters. I wouldn't even consider a quick slant over the middle for a 180-pound soaking wet receiver to be an easy touch necessarily. Get this guy out in space, get him out on the sideline on a bubble screen, or throw him a deep shot, which they haven't done yet. They have not thrown one deep ball to him. It's driving me nuts a little bit, but Josh is absolutely right. That's the case right now. Tyler Boyd is the number 2, and John Ross is borderline droppable. I mean, it's you got to kind of be a truther like me to hold out, and I'm going to hold out a little bit longer than 2 games, but I wouldn't fault anyone for cutting him.
I have a theory that with Joe Mixon being out for 2 weeks, it's John Ross that is a big benefactor, because I think as opposed to giving the ball to Giovanni Bernard 15 times on the ground, they're going to use more short passing as an alternative to rushing the ball. So I like the idea of bubble screens like that. To John Ross.
But they haven't ran those. I don't even know if they have them in their playbook. I mean, I think short passing is going to end up being Tyler Boyd's role out of the slot, unfortunately.
You know who else doesn't know if that's in the playbook? John Ross.
Right.
I just thought of that one too. Okay,
that's a good one. That's a good one.
Stop it. Who's your number one pickup other than Tyler Boyd, Ben?
I'm gonna have to look at numbers a little bit more, but Antonio Callaway's definitely interesting. I mean, if nobody picked him up after Josh Gordon got cut, you got to definitely pay attention to him. He has a lot of upside. Very good athlete. And has his baggage and his issues as well, and kind of a parallel there to Josh Gordon, that has a ton of talent but also has a lot of baggage. But we saw him catch that deep touchdown late in the game in New Orleans this week, and I think he's going to be probably the biggest beneficiary of Gordon being gone. I don't necessarily think Rashad Higgins is going to be a special guy. We've seen him for 2 years, and he hasn't really done a ton. And he's had some opportunity to do things. He ran a lot with the first team last year when Coleman and Gordon were both out. In fairness, his quarterback play was terrible. But I think Callaway's the guy alongside Landry and Njoku and Duke Johnson. So he's definitely somebody that was interesting. James Washington was really interesting this year. Got a ton of air yards, caught a touchdown, his only catch, but he got 5 targets. His ADOT was 25.4. So he was used as like a downfield threat. And we talked about how Juju's ADOT was 5.2. That's going to be your 3 receiver set for this team. And they're going to be seeing targets in different areas of the field. Obviously, Antonio Brown's going to see targets everywhere, but Juju's getting kind of some underneath options. And James Washington's going to kind of fill that downfield vacated Martavis Bryant role. So he's an interesting guy for sure to have on your watch list. We talked about Lindsey, if he was going to be available, or if he for some reason was available, he's definitely somebody you should be scooping up.
How much are you spending on your fab on Philip Lindsey?
If Lindsey's still available, I think you're spending at least like 30%, probably more at this point, because he looks like a starting running back. I mean, he's a 35% guy. Probably got picked up in most leagues last week, though.
No, I want to follow up on the Browns situation because, yeah, they're 0-1 and 1. Haven't won a game yet, but they were certainly competitive. At the same time, I think their offense in general looked pretty bad. Josh, how close do you think we are for this Browns organization just to say to hell with it? We're going to take out Tyrod Taylor. It's Baker Mayfield time. Throw the rookies out there and let them sink or swim.
I think that's going to require coaching change first. So I think once they finally decide to dismiss Hugh Jackson, I think Baker Mayfield starts the next game. That's kind of my opinion right now.
2024 is what you're saying.
It's possible. I mean, they haven't fired Hugh yet. When's it going to happen? I think it's going to happen this season. At some point, there will probably be enough clamoring within the locker room for change that I think Haley's going to take over the job and Baker's going to be his guy. But when that's going to happen, I don't know. Is it going to be 2 more weeks? Is it going to be 6 more weeks? Is it going to be 12 more weeks? Your guess is as good as mine.
Well, we are the media, so we have a little power here, Josh. Do we want to start a hashtag here? Do we want to get something trending?
That's like literally what fantasy Twitter does, is just talk about firing Hugh Jackson. Like,
let's get an online petition going while we're at it.
It's like I think there's 60% of the tweets each week is just about Hugh Jackson getting canned.
He's the Teflon Don. Anybody else you want to add, Ben? I mean, we've talked about Callaway, talked about Philip Lindsey, Washington, Tyler Boyd.
Calvin Ridley was really good this week. If he got dropped in your league, if Josh Gordon got dropped, I would add him. I probably wouldn't bid a ton on him because we don't know where he's going to be and we don't know what's going on with him. But I would throw a bid on him for sure. It doesn't sound like he has anything impending. I mean, the way that this is played out, it doesn't sound like there's going to be an impending suspension. It sounds like it was just whatever.
They're just done with him, right?
What's that?
They're just done with him.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, Ridley was a good example of. I actually was watching that game when he caught his first pass, and the announcer said, Yeah, they said they wanted to get him involved this week, so they got him in catch early, yada, yada, yada. And he ended up having a really good game. I mean, maybe Cincinnati should have watched that game and realized that, you want to get guys that you want involved in your offense because you spent a top 10 pick on him. Why did you even draft him? You should probably throw him some early targets and get him involved in the game and see what he can do. Anyway, Bryce Butler.
Even we're talking about Calvin Ridley, you're talking about John Ross. I like this.
Right, yeah. So I went from I just really seamless transition there. Bryce, everything goes back to John Ross. Bryce Butler, though.
He's kind of like a John Ross, like a poor man's John Ross, isn't he, Bryce Butler?
Yeah, kind of like a poor man's John Ross.
Yeah.
He signed back with Dallas. We just heard this afternoon, Sunday afternoon. Sounds like they're going to sign him. He was released from Arizona. He was with Dallas last year. Looked pretty good in a small sample last year playing with Dak. And their outside receivers are very, very bad. So, especially in deeper leagues, I'm going to probably try and grab Bryce Butler off whatever. Like if I'm in a deep dynasty, I'm definitely going to see if he's on waivers. And if I'm in a deep redraft league, if I have a spot, I might consider grabbing him.
All right, well, that just about does it. It was a busy week, too. Before we let you go, though, Josh, where can we find you on Twitter?
You can find me at Fantasy ADHD.
And Ben Gretch, where can we find you?
At Yards Per Gretch.
And what can we expect on Fantasy Insider this week? I mean, I know we're killing it as far as content goes, but anything special on the pipeline for you guys?
No, we're on the in-season schedule, so same stuff. We'll have the waiver article up tomorrow. I'll have an article about some interesting team volume notes. I'm sure we'll be talking about the Cardinals, setting records in terms of not running any plays. And then Stealing Signals will be coming out on Tuesday, and Davis Maddox stock up and down article. Then we have the position reports. We have the buy low and sell high. We have streamer articles. We got the whole package for you. They'll be coming out all week. I'll be updating rest of season rankings probably after Stealing Signals. So look for that on like Tuesday or Wednesday if you want to get some trade offers out and you want to see an updated rest of season rankings list. But yeah, we'll have some good stuff for you all week.
Sounds like a plan. And you need to check out Fantasy Insiders, by the way, because if you aren't a member, sortable statistics that we talk about here on the show, targets, ADOT, receptions, all this sortable, and most of the time within the day that the game happened. You're not going to find that on many other sites at all. Truly, truly amazing stuff here on Fantasy Insiders. Got to let you go. Thanks for joining us, though. We'll catch you next week on the Fantasy Insiders Snap Judgment Initial Reaction Show. We'll see you next week.